It's Tuesday, so that means it's time for another top 10 video. This time, I'm going to be giving you my top 10 races in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So if you want to see what those are, stay tuned. This is it. This is the whole bit. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here. And let's get into a couple things first. First of all, sponsor for today's video, as you may have seen from my little miniature there, is my good friends at Hero Forge. They sponsored this video and were nice enough to send me a mini, or actually allow me to design minis for all 10 of these top 10 race videos. So I'll be overlaying pictures on screen of these close-up minis so you can see them for yourself. These are all premium plastic minis that have been hit with, looks like, a grade primer from the folks at Hero Forge. These are ordered from them directly, sent straight to me. The version of Mini Ted that you saw earlier is a very early version that they gave me access to of their color Kickstarter that will be launching live for the masses later this year. So I got a little early access, so that's this guy. So rules for... I guess I should also say Hero Forge does put out new content, as in new options for all the minis every Tuesday in what they call Treasure Tuesdays. So if you want to check that out, I highly recommend you go and check the link in the description. But heroforge.com, it's free. You can make your own minis. And again, once the color version is put out for everybody, you'll be able to design your own cool color minis. And if you're not an artist like me, maybe this could be how you make your character. Maybe for your character art, you can design them and make them color and do all sorts of fun, cool things with that. So anyway, let's get on to the video. The rules for this video are they have to be official 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons races. That's it. It's my top 10 list. They're not necessarily in any specific order, though I did kind of go in increasing order in my mind of what I think is the best. But it's my list. It's probably going to differ from yours. It is mine, so my opinion is obviously all over this video. Number 10. Number 10 are Grung. I realize that they are definitely not one of the absolute top races, but they are one of my personal favorites, and I guess this is one of my personal favorite makes it in, since kobolds, as I've stated in the past, aren't that great. Grung, I think, really are. They're awesome. I would love to play one. That's why I made the mini that you're seeing on screen, because I'm hoping to one day get a chance to play one. But what makes Grung so great and why do I like them? Well, they do get a bonus to dexterity and constitution, right? Typically, if you're going to be a martial character, you want to have a bonus to either strength or dexterity, and then a great secondary ability score to have is constitution. Again, this also works well. Pretty much dexterity and constitution works even if you're not going to be a martial character. Even if you're going to be a spellcaster, bonuses to both dex and con are going to help you no matter what. Proficiency with perception. Perception is the best skill in the game by and far, so to have access to it for free is great. You do have a lower walking speed, but you have an innate climb speed. You can breathe air and water. You're immune to poison and the poison condition, one of the most common damage types and one of the most common conditions. You do have this poisonous skin feature, which is any creature that comes in direct contact with you has to make a con save or be poisoned for a minute. They're no longer in contact with you. They can repeat the save, but you can apply the poison as part of already making an attack, and when you do so, the target must succeed on a con save or take 2d4 poison damage. I think this works very well for a rogue, but this could be on a paladin, this could be on a fighter. Any character can really use the poison damage, and it's unlimited. There's no recharge on it, and it happens as part of the attack. The only fun and interesting downside in my mind is even if you have to touch someone to heal them, let's say you are some sort of healing class, they are still in contact with you. So even though you may be casting Cure Wounds on them, you might poison them at the same time. And I kind of like that concept from a roleplay perspective. You have a standing jump. Your long jump is 25 feet and your high jump is 15 feet without a running start. But the big downside, as everybody knows, is water dependency. You have to immerse yourself in water for at least 1 hour during a day. If you fail to immerse yourself in water for at least 1 hour during a day, you suffer 1 level of exhaustion at the end of that day. and you can only recover this exhaustion through magic or by immersing yourself in water. The only downside is that you only speak Grung, technically, but you can usually gain a language through other means to fix that up. Number 9. Number 9 is Tabaxi. This is obviously our more leopard, more jungle cat version of our lion, what we saw with the Leonin recently in Mythic Odysseys of Theros. In my mind, Tabaxi, way better. What do you get from it? Dexterity and Charisma. Again, Dex is a power stat in 5th edition. It does so much. And Charisma is the most commonly used spellcasting modifier in the game. It also has very good implications for social situations. So these two ability score improvements are pretty solid. Walking speed of 30 feet. You have Dark Vision, which is always good. Feline Agility is pretty cool because it's a unique thing that we only really see with Tabaxi. When you move on your turn in combat, you can double your speed until the end of the turn. And then once you use this trait, you can't use it again until you've moved 0 feet on one of your turns. But this can get into all manner of craziness if you combo this with things like haste and other abilities. You can get ridiculously fast movement speed for a short period of time. You have Cat Claws, which do give you a climbing speed of 20 feet. And you can use them as a natural weapon, dealing a d4 plus your strength modifier and damage if you so choose. And you also get proficiency in 2 skills. Perception, again, as I've stated, one of the best, and Stealth, arguably another very powerful skill to have proficiency in. And you can speak, read, and write Common, and you get to pick the next language. I don't know, it's a very powerful race. It can do very well be very well for, I see a lot of rogues, a lot of Tabaxi rogues out there. Is what I see pretty commonly, but a Tabaxi Bard could be interesting. But I'd love to hear, I'm sure people have played a bunch of other classes with Tabaxi, but those are the 2 that I see the most. Number 8. Number 8 is Halfling. Aside from the funky art that I'm not a huge fan of from the Player's Handbook, they're pretty great. This is the first race in our list that technically gets a sub-race. So I'll give you why I like Halflings and then what my favorite sub-race is for them as well. So you're going to get a Dexterity bonus. You're small. You do have Lucky, which is arguably the best reason to be a Paladin. I'm sorry, Paladin. Wow, what? Best reason to be a Halfling. When you roll a 1 on a d20 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die and must use the new roll. Being able to re-roll 1s is huge because it's an always-on feature. You will never not want to use this ability. You have advantage on saving throws against being frightened, which frightens a pretty common condition to suffer, and you can move through the space of any creature that is a size larger than you, and a reminder you are small in size. And then there are various sub-races. I do like Ghostwise Halfling because of the telepathy that you get, but this one was only found in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, so not a lot of people are aware of it. One of the best ones in my mind is probably just the base Stout Halfling, which is Constitution +1, because you're also going to have, you already have advantage on saving throws versus Frightened. You're now going to have it on Poison and resistance to poison damage. Again, one of the most common damage types. And as I stated, bonuses to Constitution are always good. If your DM does allow you to use the Wild Mount sub-races, then I also like the Lotus Den Halfling, because you're going to just get magic, which is something you typically don't have access to. And when you make ability checks to track, you rather have disadvantage, and you can move across difficult terrain made of non-magical plants and undergrowth without expending extra movement. All in all, a good race, and again, the lucky feature is just can be so exploited, and it's frustrating and sometimes as a DM to watch people be able to just re-roll 1s whenever they get them. But that's the nature of the race. Number 7. Number 7 is Half-Orc. If you're gonna be a fightery martial type, Half-Orc is really one of the best options out there. Strength score increased by 2, con by 1. We've already talked about the ability scores associated with that. Dark Vision, a wonderful feature to have. A lot of classes, or a lot of races do have it, and you're one of the ones that does. Proficiency in the Intimidation skill, again, not always useful, but has benefits, and you'll have the proficiency for free, so you can't argue with that. Relentless Endurance, absolutely one of the best features about being a Half-Orc. When you're dropped to 0 hit points and not killed outright, you can drop to 1 instead. And you can use this feature again when you finish a long rest. And then again, the combo here is savage attacks. When you score a critical hit with a weapon attack, you can roll one of the weapon's damage dice one additional time and add it to the extra damage of the crit. So for example, if you are wielding a battle axe that does a d8, normally when you crit, you would deal 2d8. Because of savage attacks, you would deal 3d8 damage. Which is pretty nutty, honestly. It can be very, very useful. And again, this is one of those things that's like always on in the background. And when it comes online, you're going to be very pumped whenever you get to use it. And you can speak, read, and write Common and Orc. Yeah, I know there's I'm not really dealing with the dragon marks because I know there's a couple options, but I think the base Half-Orc is one of the best. And really, more often than not, if you have an option, a lot of people like to go Goliath because of Critical Role. Half-Orc is really just a better Goliath, in my opinion, in every single way. Number 6. Number 6 is Dwarf. Again, another race that has sub-races, so I'll give you my favorite of that. But Dwarf, again, classic fantasy race. Their main stat is a Constitution +2. Again, as we've said, Constitution is universally useful. You are going to have a 25-foot walking speed, but that's not reduced by wearing heavy armor, so that's a small benefit there. Dark vision, again, always useful. As we've stated numerous times, advantage on saving throws versus poison and resistant to poison damage is very, very beneficial. Will be useful from level 1 all the way to level 20. Proficiency with the Battle Axe, Hand Axe, Light Hammer, and Warhammer. Again, if you are a class that doesn't necessarily get access to certain martial weapons, this is a great way to get around that. Tool proficiency and Smith's tools, Brewer's tools, or Mason's tools. That has use depending on how your DM handles them. Stone cutting is a similar thing as well. When you make a history check related to the origin of stonework, you are considered proficient in the history skill and add double your proficiency bonus to the check instead of your normal proficiency bonus. So you should be really good about figuring out things related to stonework. And then you speak Common and Dwarvish. As far as my favorite sub-race, it is definitely Hill Dwarf. This is kind of, I feel like, the go-to cleric race, which is a +1 to wisdom, and then your hit point maximum increases by 1, and then increases 1 time every time you gain a level. So that is very powerful. That can, depending on what kind of class you're going to play, this can just give you that much more hit points. An extra 1 hit point every level is big. You might not think it, but that's basically the difference between having a D6 hit die and having a D8 hit die. Runner-up for that would be Mountain Dwarf, because it's one of the few races that gets a +2 to 2 ability scores. It gets a +2 Constitution, +2 Strength, and then you gain proficiency with light and medium armor, which also leads to very interesting builds I've seen of the armored Dwarven Wizard. Number 5. Number 5 is Elf, and I'll be honest, elves are one of my absolute favorite races. I've always very much enjoyed playing as elves and elven characters. I think it probably realistically stems from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and being a big fan of both of those novels, and then also the movies were, right towards basically my whole high school years was when those movies were coming out. So I'm a big fan of that, and plus I'm an archer. I've been doing archery my whole life, so that might be a slight influence there because of the elves' typical use for bows. So elves also get a lot of really good, powerful abilities. So dexterity +2, dark vision always useful. Once again, perception as a proficiency always good. Fey ancestry, advantage on saving throws against charm and magic can't put you to sleep. I've been surprised how much the ability that magic can't put you to sleep has come up in my games, especially because certain people, you can cast a sleep spell and drop it on top of you, and you won't ever have to worry about being knocked unconscious. But more importantly, that advantage on saving throw versus charmed, they don't always come up too often, charm effects, but when they do, you're going to be very thankful that you have advantage. And then the ever complicated, ever confusing trance ability, because people don't necessarily know how to run it. So you don't need to sleep. Instead, you meditate deeply, remaining semi-conscious for 4 hours a day. Common word for this is trance. While meditating, you can dream after a fashion. Such dreams are actually mental exercises that become reflexive through the years of practice. After resting in this way, you gain the same benefit that a human does from 8 hours of sleep. everybody always seems to see that and says, oh, well, 8 hours of sleep, that's like a long rest. But it's not actually the benefits of a long rest, it's just the benefit of 8 hours of sleep. I've seen a lot of people rule it different ways, but ultimately it's just, you can be awake more and do more things. There are a ton, as you can see here, of elven subraces. One of my go-to favorites is obviously the Wood Elf. I'm a big fan of the Wood Elf, which is going to get you proficiency with long sword, short bow, and longbow. Your base movement speed is going to increase by 5 to a walking speed of 35 feet, and you can attempt to hide whenever you're only lightly obscured by foliage, heavy rain, falling snow, mist, or other natural phenomena. I really like a Wood Elf rogue, a scout rogue specifically, but I also really respect the Eberron Ariani and Valinor versions, because if we look at like a Valinor one, you're gonna have different proficiencies in that. Rather than getting long sword, short sword, long bow, short bow, you're gonna get scimitar, double scimitar, long bow, and short bow. And the double scimitar is a very cool weapon introduced in Eberron. And alternatively, the Areni version, however you pronounce it, is you choose a skill or a tool proficiency, and you basically have expertise in that. And I really like that one because if you end up playing a race, or a class rather, where you get martial weapon proficiencies, having the weapon proficiencies from being a Wood Elf is kind of redundant and useless for you, or even a High Elf gets the same proficiencies. So this type of elf I really enjoy because you can turn what would have been a relatively useless proficiency for you into expertise in a skill or tool. Reminder that thieves' tools are tools, so you could get expertise in thieves' tools without ever actually being a rogue. Or, a given skill, and perception is one you get automatically. So if you choose expertise in perception, that may go a long way. I like the Pallid Elf, the new one that was added in Wildmount. I think that one's really strong. And I really like the Eladrin, but I feel like anyone that I would want to play, I'd have to have very, very high stats to make the best use of its abilities. Number 4. Number 4 is, at least from the people I play with, it seems to be one of the most, if not the most popular race, and that is Tiefling. Right? They've had a long history through D&D of various, different abilities, but here they are going to get you a +2 charisma, a dark vision, resistance to fire damage, and the base is going to get you Thaumaturgy cantrip, Hellish Rebuke at 3rd level, cast at 2nd level, and then at 5th level, Darkness. But one of the main reasons I really like the Tiefling is because of the amount of variety that's been added to it. You could be a feral Tiefling and get a +2 to your dexterity and a +1 intelligence, which is nice for certain other races if you're not going to be charisma based. And then there are all these variant Tieflings that exist down below, where rather that you follow a certain or you're from a certain infernal heritage, and that gives you different abilities. I really like the Levistus one. Yeah, that gives you charisma +2, con +1, gives you Ray of Frost, Armor of Agathis, and Darkness, because Ray of Frost has now given you an attacking cantrip that has range, and this may help you get out of situations like if you say wanted to be a Tiefling Paladin, for example. This will give you a range option that you wouldn't normally have. And then there's obviously the other variant Tieflings that were introduced in Sword Coast Adventures Guide, but I don't know. I'm a big fan of Tieflings. I like playing them. I've seen them in almost every single game I've ever played. Someone plays one, and that has to be for a reason. Number 3. Number 3 is Variant Human. I'm sure as we start to get down on these lists, the ones that are here are going to surprise no one. Regular Human, in my mind, just doesn't really make the cut. The +1 to every ability score is okay, but realistically, with Variant Human as an option, you're going to be getting, instead of a +1 to every ability score, a +1 to 2 ability scores of your choice, a proficiency in a skill of your choice, which is great because, again, this can help you get something that you might need or want that isn't given to you by your background or your class. And the real big winner here is a feat of your choice. So being on the lesser scale of only getting 1 to each to 2 ability scores, you can technically choose a feat that give you a bonus to an ability score to kind of make up for that. So this was also for the longest time the only way to have a 2 wisdom race, a race that gave you +2 to wisdom, would be to choose wisdom as one of those ability scores and then choose a feat that gave you that bonus. Obviously, we've gotten additional races since then, but the versatility of being able to have a feat at first level really just opens up the majority of a whole bunch of different kinds of character builds or concepts, or like I've done build videos here on the channel, and the whole build crux could have been handled by taking Magic Initiate as a feat, and you could have had that from level 1, and that would have been just a great thing to have. And the amount of times I've played a human character just because I could get a feat at the start has been, that's a little min-maxy, sure, but I have had a good time doing that. Obviously, if you choose to break that and go with a feat at first level as just like a general rule for your game, then human loses some of its luster, but it's arguably one of the best races in the game, as it seems to technically kind of be in a lot of D&D. So I don't know. It's really well done, and I'm a big fan. But the only downside is you're playing a human, and you are one, so it doesn't really give you that whole playing, getting the chance to be something that you're not. Number 2. Number 2 is Half-Elf. Originally I was going to, when I was first going to make my very first 5th edition character, I decided I was going to play a paladin. And originally, I was looking at Dragonborn because I was like, oh, that's really cool. The stats line up pretty well for being a paladin. Plus, Dragon Man, that sounds cool. And I was flipping through and I looked at the half-elf and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Why would I play anything else other than a half-elf if I'm going to be a charisma-based class? It just does it so well. So what do you get for this? You're going to get a +2 to your charisma and then a +2 to 2 other ability scores. A +1 to 2 other ability scores. So again, similar to what we talked about with the one dwarf that gets a total of 4 ability score points, half-elf is again one of the very few that gets that as well. Charisma +2 and a +1 to 2 ability scores of your choice is basically what we just talked about for a human, but you're also going to get +2 charisma on top of that. You're going to have Dark Vision, which is, as we've said, is super useful. You're going to get the Fey Ancestry that the elves have, which is advantage on saving throws versus charm, and magic can't put you to sleep. And then you're also going to get proficiency in 2 skills of your choice. So it's humans get 1 skill, you're going to get 2, and you're going to get Common, Elvish, and an extra language on top of that. So you have a lot of versatility here. There also have been several variant half-elf races added. I more often than not just like to stick with the base one because I find the proficiency in 2 skills to be very useful. But Sword Coast Adventures Guide added several options where you can replace the skill versatility, where you get proficiency in 2 skills, with some other ability due to your, what the elven heritage you had. So there's the Aquatic Elf, which gives you, a swim speed instead of skill versatility. The other one that's usually a good contender I like it too is Drow Magic, which is Dancing Lights as a cantrip, at level 3 Fairy Fire, and at level 5 Darkness, as opposed to 2 skills. And then a high half-elf is you get to choose a wizard cantrip or the elves weapon training, which is longsword, short sword, longbow, short bow. That's the high half-elf. And then there is the wood half-elf, which is you could choose to either have the same weapon training or the 5-foot movement, an extra 5 feet of movement, or the ability to hide in natural phenomenon, as opposed to skill versatility. But like I said, more often than not, I just choose the base half-elf. That one's my personal favorite. I have done one where I chose the Drow heritage just because of the extra spells. Was kind of nice to have on a class that doesn't have magic or have such versatile magic. But more often than not, I would say just stick with the base half-elf and you'll be happy. Number 1. And I'm sure potentially surprising no one, number one on my list is Yuan-ti Pureblood. It's just so good. It's surprising how good it is in compared to every other race, and to the point where I see it banned at a lot of tables. Let's take a look at what you actually get here. So you're gonna get a +2 to charisma, +1 to intelligence. So I say that's probably like one of the big offsets for playing a Yuan-ti Pureblood is you're gonna get a bonus to charisma and intelligence. That's 2 mental ability scores. So if you're gonna be playing like a caster type, like a charisma-based caster, the intelligence is less useful for you. You know, if this was charisma +2 and dexterity +1, it would be ridiculously powerful. But that's, you know, you may or may not use one of the ability scores, or if you're going to be some like a martial version of one of these, you might not use any of them. Depends. Dark vision, as we said, super useful. You get spellcasting, and this spellcasting is different because it's just so wild, right? So poison spray as a cantrip, that's good. It's a damaging cantrip. Poison damage, heavily resisted, and it's also, you know, a saving throw, so people may succeed and take no damage, but you still have it. You can cast Animal Friendship an unlimited number of times, but only targeting snakes, which again has its potential uses. And at 3rd level, you can cast Suggestion once a long rest. That Suggestion is a very powerful spell to have once a long rest, on top of an unlimited version of another spell and a cantrip. Not only do you get everything I've just said, but you also have advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects with your magical resistance, and you are just flat out immune to poison and the poison condition, and you get 3 languages, Common, Abyssal, and Draconic. We saw the immunity to poison damage and poison conditioned on the Grung back at number 10, but the Grung has to submerge themselves in water for up to an hour, or they gain levels of exhaustion, where the Yuan-ti has no sort of mechanic similar to that. They just get immunity. So they're super powerful. As I've stated, a lot of people I see have just flat out banned them from their table. I think they're super cool, so I'd allow them at my table. I just need the player to give me a really good explanation as to why this inherently kind of evil character has decided to travel with the party. So anyway, that's my top 10 races / sub races from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. There's been a lot of other releases since then, but I feel like, honestly, it's interesting to me that the majority of the races on my top 10 list are ones still contained in the player's handbook. Because I still feel like a lot of the times those are very strong. Not all the time, as I've shown a couple examples, but for the most part, I think that they are the strongest races out there. But let me know your thoughts. What are your top 10 races, or even your favorite race to play in 5th edition? My guess is a lot of people are going to say Tiefling, because that's just what I've seen in my experience. But the next one tomorrow on Wednesday. So thank you again to my patrons on Patreon for continuing to support the channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would appreciate it if you did so. But, you know, make your own decisions and do what you want.